Welcome back, casual gardeners, and a very special welcome to any new viewers who are joining us today. It's spring in most of the northern hemisphere, and that means hopefully there are a lot of potential new gardeners thinking about getting into the hobby. This video is for you if you're new. My goal with this video is to give you my 5 top tips. Just 5, because as a new gardener, you're already a little overwhelmed. And then I want to go over what I think are the 5 easiest vegetables for beginner gardeners to grow. Let's get into it. Stay small. My first garden was a half barrel filled with planting soil, and I planted 3 tomato plants in it. The advantage of starting small is that you can focus on just a few plants and learn them. Then you can branch out, you can embiggen your garden, and you can learn more plants the following season, and it will snowball. And the great thing about gardening is that you will never run out of plants to learn about, or new methods to learn about, or new ways to use your space, or new ways to... It's endless. This is a fractal hobby that, if you get into it, will keep you entertained for the rest of your life. So my next piece of advice is, I think, good for everybody. Learn your garden before you start. Have an eye for how much sun or shade that garden patch is going to get. Get a feel for the soil. Do you need to get some compost or manure and mix it in? Most of the plants that we grow in our gardens do need full sun. So that is at least 6 full hours of sunlight every day, and 8 hours of sunlight every day is better. As you evaluate your future garden site, you're also going to want to look at what is the water situation going to be like. Because the easier it is to water your garden, the more likely you are to do it regularly, and the less likely you are to forget. Visit your garden every day, even if it's only for 5 minutes. As you visit your garden, look at your plants. Get a feel for the colors and textures of their leaves. How much do they droop over before you water them? How much do they stand back up after you water them? Just like any other pet, if you don't know what your plants look like when they're healthy, you won't know what they look like when they're not healthy. If you weed for just a little while every day, you will find that it's a lot less stressful and a lot easier to keep on top of than if you weed for a longer while once a week. Check your plants for insect damage and maybe even see if you can spot your pests. Most of the insects that visit our plants are not going to damage them and should be actually welcomed in our gardens as part of a healthy ecosystem. But checking every day does help make sure that when we need to control some pests, we can do it before they get out of hand. Very few new gardeners start from seed, and that's okay. But make sure when you're buying starts for your garden that you're buying healthy starts. Your local nurseries are going to carry the plant varieties that they know will do best in your specific climate, and they'll carry those varieties when you should have them. Be extra careful to make sure that you're not buying sick plants, and they will have knowledgeable staff on hand that you can ask questions about the plants. And they do all of this because a local nursery is reliant on your happiness and your return business to be successful. Big box stores are not reliant on their garden centers to be successful. They make a little extra cash, but you're not likely to find someone who's knowledgeable. The one time I did buy a sick plant, it did come from a big box store, and they can have plants that are either inappropriate for your climate or are wildly out of season. Like right now, if I go to my big box store that's just a 10-minute walk away from my house, go in there and I will see 2-foot-tall tomato plants. They're stacked in the aisles, kind of in the way because they can't put them out yet. All of those plants are going to die. Not one of those 2-foot-tall tomato plants is there at the right time. And finally, grow what you eat. It's okay to grow things and experiment, but if you consistently grow what you eat from your garden, you'll probably be a lot happier. And now, here are my picks for the 5 what I think are the best easy vegetables for beginner gardeners to grow. There are more than 5 easy vegetables. You are not limited to this at all. These are what I'm throwing out to get you started in your garden. My very first beginner vegetable is not a particular vegetable at all, but a whole category of vegetables, and that is the leafy greens. Every single leafy green is a proud descendant of a weed and will grow like a weed in your garden. If you're starting small, avoid leafy greens that are going to get too big for your space. For example, a cabbage plant can grow to be 2 feet wide and 2 feet tall, but you can actually eat a lot off a single cabbage head, so just make sure you've budgeted the space for it, okay? Leafy green tips. Lettuce, kale, and spinach are all very easy plants. Lettuce and spinach don't like to dry out or get too hot, so it's best to plant them in the spring, and you may not be able to grow them through the summer. Kale can be susceptible to some pests. In every other way, once kale gets going, it is a beast and can almost feel impossible to kill. All of these leafy greens are going to do best if you get them in the ground before your last frost. If you're growing your leafy greens from starts, you can probably get away with planting them around your last frost or a little bit afterwards. Number 2 is peas. Peas are especially great if you're a beginner gardener with kids. Peas are incredibly easy to grow from seed, but if you don't feel comfortable, you can probably find starts somewhere. Here are my beginner pea tips. The peas that are called sugar snap peas or snow peas are intended to be picked young in the pod and eaten with the pod. If you're French, you might call them mangetot. And if you're brave enough to start peas from seed, just poke them an inch down into the soil. As soon as your soil is not frozen anymore and it's not soggy, just keep your soil moist until they germinate, usually 5 to 10 days. They're just peeking up out of the soil now. I don't know if you can see the little green bits. This is my pea trellis. It doesn't have to be fancy. If you're gardening in North or Central America, there's a very good chance that tomatoes will thrive for you in the garden. Given the right conditions, good sun, warm summers, and regular watering, they can feel almost indestructible. So here are my beginner tips for growing tomatoes. If you're growing in containers or in a garden that gets less light, so closer to 6 hours, cherry tomatoes are probably the tomato for you. They are a lot more vigorous and they're a lot less vulnerable to a lot of the issues that other varieties of tomatoes can run into. Tomatoes are very frost tender plants and they shouldn't go into the soil until your average nighttime temperature stops dropping below about 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Eggshells in your soil and Epsom salts do nothing for blossom end rot. Tomato cracking can be caused by sudden drops in temperature, or it can be caused by sudden overabundance of water. So if you're growing a big, beautiful, juicy tomato and you're all excited about eating it, and then it rains, and the next day you go out and it's all cracked open and mush, that's what happened. It's not your fault. Zucchini and yellow squash will go absolutely bonkers in your garden. You gotta grow them. Summer squash are gonna take up a 2-foot area in your garden beds, but you're gonna get so much food from them. They're easy to grow from seed, but you can also find starts. However, as a beginner gardener, I had about a 50% success rate. They hate being transplanted. If you are brave enough to try growing your squash from seed, plant them about an inch deep as soon as it's tomato weather. So when your nights are about 50 degrees Fahrenheit, look out for squash bugs when you visit your garden. They're shield-shaped beetle-looking things with sucking mouth parts, and boy do they suck. You can pick them off manually and see that they meet with an unfortunate accident. Do not throw them into your neighbor's yard. It's rude and they just fly. Lastly, for number 5, even though I'm not growing any this year, I'm going to say beans. Grow some beans. Bush beans are the easiest for you to grow because they don't require much of anything. Just plant your beans an inch deep in the soil as soon as it's tomato weather. They'll produce attractive little plants with pretty little flowers on them, and you get beans. Pole beans can be even more fun, but they do take up a lot of real estate in your garden. They can grow to be 5 or 10 feet tall. Bean tips. Once your beans have grown a bit and put down roots, they're going to feel almost indestructible. They are some of the most water-wise plants that we grow in our gardens, and once they're established, you may only have to water them about once a week in some climates. This is a crop that is just better to grow from seed. If you disturb their roots during a transplant, you can set them back a lot. Plant them 1 inch deep in tomato weather, keep the soil moist until they come up. There are a lot of other tips and plants that I could have talked about in this video, but it's already getting pretty long. Let me know in the comments if there is something that you feel I should have said to beginning gardeners, because it'll be right there now for them in the comments. You're helping. And make sure that you've subscribed to my channel so that we can share a lot more gardening goodness in the future. Thank you for joining me in my garden today. I hope you have a wonderful time in your own.